Hello, my dear friends. Take a slow breath. Let your body settle. And imagine yourself drifting gently into a different time, a different world thousands of years before you were born. A warm Egyptian night stretches around you, calm, still, and filled with the soft hum of ancient life. The sky above is a deep velvet blue. The desert sand carries the last warmth of the fading sun, and far in the distance the Nile glimmers softly, like a thin ribbon of starlight winding through the land. Tonight, we walk into the life of a woman whose power rarely appeared in loud announcements or carved monuments. She moved gently, wisely, and quietly, yet she shaped a kingdom. Her name was Tiye, the Queen Mother. The silent force behind pharaohs, the mind that guided empires, the woman who ruled not from a throne, but from the subtle shadows where true influence often lives. But before she became all that, she was just a young girl, living in a calm Egyptian town, listening to the world more carefully than anyone realized. Imagine the soft sound of the morning in her childhood home. Akhmim, the town where she was born, wakes slowly. The sun glows gently over mud brick houses. Women sweep the courtyards. Men prepare their tools. Children run across dusty paths, laughing softly, still sleepy. Inside one home, Tiye opens her eyes. A girl with sharp awareness, calm energy, and a quiet strength. Her hair is dark and silky. Her eyes observant, her movements slow and thoughtful even as a child. Her father, a respected priest, teaches her the rhythm of the sacred world. Her mother, a noblewoman of dignity, teaches her the silent language of influence. Their home smells of warm bread, burning incense, and papyrus scrolls. Every evening, her father reads softly. His voice rises and falls like waves, and little Tiye listens, absorbing every word, every lesson, every meaning. She learns early that power doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes true power is quiet, gentle, calm, and unseen. Let us walk slowly through her home. The walls are smooth and cool. The floor is lined with woven mats. A small wooden chest glows faintly in lamplight, filled with delicate jewelry and linen gowns. Next to it, the shelves hold clay jars of honey, oils, and herbs. A breeze flows through the doorway carrying faint whispers of the river. Tiye's childhood world is full of texture, warmth, and gentle sounds. The grinding of grain, the trickle of water, the rustle of palm leaves outside, and the soft chanting of priests at dawn. The Nile shapes everything. People wake with its rhythm, work by its rhythm, and sleep with its silence. Tiye feels deeply connected to this flow. She carries it inside her. A calm awareness, patient and steady. Even as she grows older, she remains different. Thoughtful, observant, unusually wise for her age. People begin to notice her presence, not because she demands attention, but because she has a quiet gravity, a calmness that feels ancient, a softness that hides incredible strength. In the evenings, she sits outside watching people. She sees how they talk, how they argue, how they love, and she understands, even before adulthood, that human nature is predictable, emotional, and easily influenced by someone who truly knows how to listen. Her destiny is forming, silently. It moves toward her like the slow drift of the Nile at night. And one day, fate will bring a prince into her life. A prince who will look at her not as a common girl, but as someone rare, someone powerful, someone who thinks differently. But the night is still young, and Tiye is still a young woman in a peaceful town. For now, breathe slowly, and imagine the soft glow of an oil lamp beside her as she reads quietly, preparing unknowingly for the life that awaits her. Because soon, Egypt will meet Tiye, and nothing will be the same. Night settles gently over the town of Akhmim, and Tiye, now a young woman, walks slowly along the edge of the Nile. The moon reflects on the water like a long, shimmering path. Each ripple glows softly as if guiding her toward the future she cannot yet see. Her footsteps are steady, unhurried. The air is cool, and the world around her feels calm and timeless. Tiye's life has always been peaceful but quietly extraordinary. Her wisdom has grown. Her presence has deepened. People in her town now seek her advice. Even elders pause when she speaks. There is something in her voice, soft but firm, gentle but confident, calm but unmistakably strong. Soon whispers begin to travel across towns. Whispers about a young woman with unusual intelligence. A young woman who speaks like a queen even though she is not one. These whispers float through marketplaces, through temple courtyards, through riverboats gliding along the water, and eventually, they reach the royal palace. Far away in Thebes, the heart of the Egyptian kingdom, a young prince listens to these whispers with growing curiosity. His name is Amenhotep, a prince destined to become king, yet still learning who he truly is. He is thoughtful, introspective, often overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon him. He hears that in a humble town lives a woman unlike the noble daughters he has met, a woman who understands people deeply, a woman whose mind is sharp, whose presence is calm, and whose spirit is strong. He cannot ignore this. And so, one quiet morning, he decides to leave the palace and meet her. Imagine the soft sound of horse hooves approaching the edge of Tiye's town. The dust rises gently in the warm morning air. Villagers look up, surprised to see finely dressed guards escorting a young man in elegant linen, gold bracelets glimmering around his arms. He is not arrogant, not loud, not intimidating. There is a softness to him, a thoughtful gentleness much like Tiye's. When he enters the town square, people bow respectfully. But Tiye, she simply stands still, watching him with calm eyes. Not fearful, not amazed, just steady, composed, present. The prince notices her immediately. In a crowd of bowing figures, her stillness stands out more than any gesture of respect ever could. He walks toward her slowly. The world around them seems to fade into silence. Children stop playing. Women pause their work. Even the wind holds its breath. When their eyes meet, there is no spark of drama, no thunder, no loud emotion, just a quiet understanding, a recognition, as if two minds shaped for leadership have finally met. Amenhotep speaks first, his voice soft. "I have heard you are wise," he says, "and I wanted to see for myself." Tiye listens, her gaze steady, and when she finally speaks, her voice flows like calm river water. "Wisdom isn't something we claim," she replies gently. "It's something others see when they're ready." The prince is stunned, not by boldness, not by beauty, but by her calm confidence. He realizes immediately that she is different. Different from every noble woman he has met. Different from every princess raised in luxury. She is grounded, observant, strong without being forceful, humble without being weak. In that moment, Amenhotep knows something undeniable. This woman, this quiet, intelligent, unshakable woman, is someone he needs by his side. They walk slowly along the Nile, side by side, saying little. The gentle waves touch the shore. Birds float lazily overhead. Boats drift by, their sails catching the soft morning wind. When they talk, their words blend naturally, as if they have known each other for years. She asks him how he feels about becoming king. He admits that the responsibility scares him sometimes. She listens without judgment, then says softly, "Fear is not weakness. Fear means you know the value of what you are given." Her words soothe him. Her voice calms him. and her presence steadies him in ways he never knew he needed. For the first time in a long while, Amenhotep feels understood, not respected because of his title, but seen because of his humanity. This is the moment he realizes something else. In a world full of advisors and generals and priests, the one voice he wants beside him is Tiye's. When he returns to the palace, he announces something shocking. He wishes to marry Tiye, a woman not of royal blood, a woman not from the traditional noble line. Egypt's elders protest softly. Priests whisper in corners. Nobles raise eyebrows. But the prince is calm, certain, unmoved, and when he explains his decision, his voice carries a strength he never had before. She is not born royal, he says quietly, but she is born extraordinary. Soon a royal procession leaves for Akhmim. Drums beat slowly. Flowers are scattered along the path, and Tiye, standing at her doorway, watches the golden chariots approach. The moment she steps into one, the world seems to shift gently around her. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet, inevitable movement of destiny. A girl who once sat under a palm tree reading papyrus scrolls is now on her way to become the most influential woman in Egypt. Not because of beauty, not because of birth, but because of her mind, her wisdom, her calm strength. The desert wind blows softly as the chariot moves forward. T closes her eyes and breathes in the warm air. Her journey as queen has begun. The desert wind carries the sound of distant drums as Tiye's royal chariot moves steadily toward Thebes. The sky above is pale gold. The horizon shimmers with heat, and every few moments the Nile appears beside the road, calm and endless, like a companion guiding her gently to her new life. Tiye sits with quiet composure. Her linen dress moves softly in the breeze. Her eyes remain steady, not overwhelmed, not fearful, just thoughtful. Present. Ready. She knows the palace will be different from anything she has ever experienced. She knows there will be expectations, challenges, whispers, and judgments. But she also knows something deeper. Her strength does not come from loudness or displays of power. It comes from calm clarity, a mind that sees, listens, and understands. The chariot rolls past small villages, through tall palm groves, and finally along the grand river road leading into Thebes. As the city rises ahead of her, it feels like the heart of another world, a world she is about to step into with steady feet. Massive pylons tower at the palace entrance. Lotus pillars cast long shadows, and golden statues of gods watch silently as the new queen arrives. Priests chant blessings. Servants bow deeply. Nobles stand in formal rows, their jewelry glowing in the sun. But Tiye doesn't get lost in the spectacle. She walks into the palace with slow, graceful steps, her gaze moving gently from one detail to the next. The cool stone beneath her feet, the faint scent of incense drifting from the inner halls, the quiet hum of whispered conversations. All of it settles into her mind calmly. Amenhotep, now more certain than ever of his choice, walks beside her. He leads her through the palace courtyard, past gardens filled with lotus ponds and papyrus reeds where birds rest in the shade. The air is cooler here, still, almost sacred. He stops and looks at her with genuine respect. "This palace has seen many queens," he says softly, "but none like you." Tiye meets his gaze with steady warmth. "I don't need a crown to be myself," she replies gently. "I only need a clear purpose." The prince smiles, feeling a peace he rarely felt before her arrival. Inside the palace, daily life follows a delicate rhythm. Servants move quietly, carrying polished jugs of water. Scribes bend over scrolls, writing in careful lines. Priests cross the halls in simple white linen, their steps silent. Musicians play soft melodies in distant chambers. Harps, flutes, and gentle drums echoing like a heartbeat through the stone. Most new queens enter overwhelmed, but Tiye observes everything. She studies how the household runs. She watches how people interact. She notices who carries real influence and who merely pretends. Within days, she understands the palace better than women who had lived there for decades. Her attendants begin to admire her. Her calm makes them feel safe. Her composure inspires them, and her intelligence surprises them. They whisper among themselves. She sees everything. She understands people. She has a queen's mind. But Tiye does not seek their admiration. She treats them with quiet kindness. She answers their questions with patience. She moves through the palace like a gentle river weaving through stone. Soft, but powerful enough to shape the very foundations of the place. When the royal wedding finally takes place, the entire city celebrates. Torches line the palace gates. Musicians play slow melodic hymns. Perfumes rise from incense burners, filling the night with sweet warm fragrance. Amenhotep stands beside Tiye in the great hall, where the ceiling seems to touch the sky. The walls are painted in deep blues and reds, golden stars shining around them like a midnight sky trapped indoors. Priests bless their union. They speak of harmony, balance, wisdom, and responsibility. And throughout it all, Tiye remains calm, her presence steady and radiant. She doesn't wear excessive jewels, just a simple necklace of gold and semi-precious stones. But even in simplicity, she appears regal. Not because of what she wears, but because of who she is. As the ceremony continues, many nobles watch the new queen with quiet curiosity. Some are skeptical. Some are impressed. Some do not understand why a future king chose a woman without royal blood. But within minutes of observing her stillness, her confidence, her thoughtful gaze, they begin to see what the prince saw. A woman born to lead. A woman who carries wisdom like a natural breath. A woman whose presence is soft but commanding, gentle but unbreakable. By the time the ceremony ends, the entire hall feels her quiet power. When the celebrations are over and the palace becomes silent again, Tiye walks into her private chamber for the first time. The room glows with the warm light of oil lamps. Lotus petals float in a bowl of fragrant water. A gentle breeze enters from the balcony, carrying the distant sound of the river. She stands there for a moment, taking in the peacefulness. Everything is different from her childhood home, but something inside her remains unchanged. Her strength, her clarity, her calmness. She sits gently on the edge of the low bed and places her hands in her lap. Her mind is still, her breathing soft. This palace, grand as it is, does not intimidate her, because she knows that influence is not won by raising one's voice, but by understanding the minds of others. Tonight is not the start of her life as queen. It is the beginning of something greater. A lifetime of guiding kings, shaping history, and ruling from the shadows with wisdom sharper than any blade. As the warm evening light settles over ancient Egypt, let your mind drift back into the quiet, gentle world of Queen Tiye. Imagine the air turning softer, the sound of distant footsteps fading, and the great city of Thebes preparing to sleep. In this calm hour, we continue to walk beside the woman who shaped an empire with nothing more than her wisdom, her steady presence, and the quiet power she carried within her. Tiye understood the rhythm of her palace better than anyone. She knew when the halls needed her voice, and she knew when the silence itself was enough to guide the people around her. Every evening, before the lamps were lit, she liked to step onto her private balcony. From there she could see the Nile moving like a dark ribbon, calm and steady, reflecting the last glow of the sun. She would rest her hands on the cool stone railing and breathe in the gentle night air. It was one of the few moments in her day that truly belonged to her, a time when she could think, observe, and gather her strength before the next sunrise brought new demands, new whispers, new decisions. Servants would enter quietly behind her, carrying small oil lamps with soft, flickering flames. They never disturbed her thoughts. They simply placed the lamps gently along the edges of the chamber and moved away with slow, careful steps, as if even the sound of their sandals might break the peaceful atmosphere she created around herself. For Tiye, calmness was not just a preference, it was a form of power. The calmer she remained, the more others trusted her. The steadiness of her presence made people feel safe. Ministers, generals, priests. Everyone who stood before her felt as though they were entering a space where truth mattered and fear had no place to hide. As the night deepened, she would return to her inner rooms where scented oils softened the air. The scent of lotus, gentle and sweet, floated around her. This fragrance was tied to memory, memories of her childhood, of her mother's warm hands, of long desert evenings when the sky felt impossibly wide. These scents grounded her, reminding her of where she came from, even as she walked through the highest halls of power in Egypt. The daughter of a non-royal family, who rose to become one of the most powerful women of her age. Sometimes in this quiet hour, a scribe would enter with a stack of papyrus scrolls. These were the letters and messages sent from far-off lands: Nubia, Canaan, Mitanni, Babylon. Messages from kings and governors who wished to stay in Egypt's good favor. The scribe would kneel and wait, and Tiye would choose which letters needed attention immediately. Her soft voice would guide him. Her tone never changed. Even when the message carried tension or conflict, she spoke as calmly as if she were discussing the weather. And because she remained calm, others remained calm. Problems that might have sparked fear or anger became simple matters of strategy in her presence. There were nights when she would ask for the scrolls to be left beside her bed, not because she planned to read them immediately, but because she liked knowing they were close. The world trusted her. Leaders from lands she had never seen sent their words across the desert, because they believed she would treat them with fairness. That feeling, the feeling of being trusted, was something she never took lightly. As she sat on the cushioned bench beside the soft lamplight, she would sometimes speak to herself in a whisper, almost too low for even the closest servant to hear. She would reflect on the choices she made and the ones she still needed to make. Her mind was always working, always navigating the delicate balance between power and peace. But her thoughts were gentle, like the slow movement of river water around smooth stones. And when she thought of her son, Amenhotep III, the king who adored her and listened to her counsel more closely than any advisor, her face softened. To guide a kingdom was difficult. To guide a king was even more delicate. Yet she did both with the same quiet strength. She never raised her voice. She never forced her will through fear. Instead, she shaped Egypt through presence, through patience, through the unwavering calmness that made people stop and listen. On this peaceful night, she rose from the bench and walked across her chamber. Her steps were slow and graceful, her sheer linen gown whispering softly across the floor. She approached a large wooden chest where she kept a few personal treasures, small items that reminded her of the ordinary world outside the palace. A clay figure from her childhood, a worn piece of jewelry her mother once wore, a handful of letters written in her younger hand. She would lift them gently, brushing off tiny grains of dust, and smile with a warmth that only appeared in these private moments. Holding these small memories, she would close her eyes and breathe deeply, grounding herself once again. Even queens needed moments of peace. Even the most powerful women in history needed small reminders of who they were before the world began to look at them as symbols and not as human beings. As the night grew deeper, she would sit near her bedroom window. The moonlit breeze drifted inside, carrying distant sounds from the city beyond the palace walls, the soft clatter of a pot being set down by a late working servant, the faint echo of a fisherman calling to his partner near the river, the quiet steps of guards passing beneath the window. These sounds comforted her. They reminded her that the world outside her chambers still moved, still breathed, still trusted her to guide it. She would eventually lie down, her body sinking into linen sheets cooled by the night air. A handmaiden would dim the last lamp, leaving only a soft orange glow. Tiye would listen to the room settling around her, the crackle of cooling clay, the distant hum of nighttime insects, the slow, steady rhythm of her own breathing. And in this deep quiet, she would let her thoughts drift from governance to gentler things. Memories of her father teaching her how to read the sky, memories of walking along the riverbank with her husband when they were young, memories of her son as a child running through the garden laughing as sunlight danced on the leaves. Slowly her breathing would deepen, her body would sink into rest. The queen who ruled from the shadows, who guided kings and influenced empires, would allow the night to carry her gently into sleep. And as she slept, Egypt slept too. Calmed by her presence, protected by her wisdom, and shaped by the quiet, enduring strength of Queen Tiye. As the gentle night settles more deeply over ancient Egypt, let us slowly return to Queen Tiye's world. The palace grows quieter. The warm stone walls release the last of the day's heat, and the cool breeze moves softly through the long corridors. Somewhere far in the distance, a lone musician plucks the strings of a harp, the notes drifting like tiny ripples across still water. Everything feels peaceful, steady, unhurried. And in this quiet hour, we move into another part of Queen Tiye's life. Her mornings. Before the sun rose, the palace was wrapped in a dreamy, bluish darkness. Lamps glowed faintly in a few corners, but most of the halls were touched only by the soft, pale light of the coming dawn. Tiye often woke just before sunrise, not because someone called her, but because her mind was trained to greet the day early. She opened her eyes softly, as if waking from a dream she wished to hold on to just a little longer. For a moment she would lie still, listening to the world outside her window, the flutter of birds shaking sleep from their wings, the first rustle of servants beginning their morning tasks, the distant hum of the river waking up. She would slowly sit up, letting her linen sheets fall gently around her. Her hair, long and dark, rested softly over her shoulders, warmed by the first golden light creeping into the room. A handmaiden entered quietly, carrying a small bowl of cool water. She bowed her head low, placing the bowl on a small table beside the bed and stepped back without a sound. Tiye dipped her fingers into the water, feeling the freshness of the morning wash over her skin. It woke her senses, but in a soft way, like a whisper of light traveling across the surface of the Nile. As she rose from the bed, she walked toward the open window. The breeze was different now, lighter, fresher, carrying the soft scent of wet soil and early lotus flowers. The sky outside glowed in shades of gentle gold and pale pink, the sun lifting its head slowly above the eastern horizon. She rested her hands on the cool edge of the window and let the morning air brush against her face. It was quiet, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that held the beginning of everything. A few servants moved carefully through the courtyard below, sweeping the paths, arranging water jars, preparing the palace for another day. They always looked up when they noticed the queen by the window, not because she demanded their attention, but because her stillness, her quiet presence, had a way of drawing the eyes of everyone around her. She offered them a gentle nod, and they bowed deeply before returning to their tasks. Even her smallest gestures carried reassurance, a steady reminder that the palace was in safe, careful hands. After a few peaceful moments, Tiye returned to her inner chamber. Another handmaiden brought fragrant oils for the morning, light scents of almond and lotus. These oils were soothing, like soft sunlight captured in liquid form. They were gently brushed along her arms and shoulders as she prepared for the long day ahead. Tiye did not decorate herself with too much jewelry in the morning. A simple collar of bright beads, a small gold armband, perhaps a light crown of woven reeds and gold. She chose only what felt calm, balanced, harmonious with the day. Once she was ready, she walked slowly toward the small chamber where her personal breakfast was served. The room was quiet, filled with the warm glow of early sunlight. Platters of simple food sat before her: fresh figs, honey, warm bread, and cool water flavored with mint. Tiye believed in eating lightly in the morning. Heavy meals, she often said, clouded the mind, and she needed her mind to be clear. Egypt depended on her clarity more than most people even realized. As she ate, a senior steward approached the doorway with scrolls tucked under his arm. He did not enter until she lifted her hand in a welcoming motion. He bowed low and placed the scrolls on the table beside her. These were the plans for the day: petitions, updates, small disputes among local officials, messages from priests requesting her presence, lists of supplies for temple repairs, and small notes from her son, the king, asking for her counsel. She read each message quietly, letting the words settle before she responded. Her mind worked like the slow turning of a great wheel, patient, steady, never rushed. When she finished reading, she stepped outside into her garden courtyard, a place filled with soft green plants, tall papyrus stalks, and a small pool where lotus flowers floated lazily on the surface. It was her favorite place in the entire palace. Birds perched in the tall branches, singing in quiet, gentle patterns. The sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft golden streaks, warming the stone paths and filling the garden with the promise of a new day. Tiye walked slowly down one of the paths, her fingers brushing lightly against the tops of the plants. Every morning she spent a few minutes alone here, letting her mind breathe. She believed that a kingdom could not be guided by a hurried heart. Calmness, she often said, was the truest form of strength. And in this soft morning air, with the world still settling into itself, she found the calmness she needed to shape her day. As she stood near the lotus pond, watching the flowers open their quiet petals to the warming sun, she whispered small prayers, not loud, not dramatic, but gentle and heartfelt. She prayed for wisdom, for balance, for peace. She prayed for her son, the king. She prayed for the farmers tending their fields, for the builders working under the rising heat, for the mothers waking their children, for the priests preparing rituals, for all those who lived under the broad sky of Egypt. And as the morning grew brighter, her day truly began. With a slow, calm breath, she turned back toward the palace, ready to face the world not with noise, but with the quiet strength that made her one of the most remarkable women in all of Egyptian history. As the gentle morning hours stretched onward, Queen Tiye moved deeper into the rhythm of her day. The palace around her slowly awakened into a calm hum of activity. Servants walked with careful steps along polished stone floors, carrying scrolls, water jars, baskets of fresh linen, and trays of food for officials. The faint echoes of their footsteps blended with the soft rustle of the morning breeze drifting through wide doorways. Everything felt calm, steady, balanced, like a slow breath moving in and out of the palace walls. Tiye walked with an unhurried grace toward the audience chamber. Every morning she dedicated time to meeting people, officials, scribes, priests, and sometimes even ordinary citizens who had been granted permission to speak with her. She believed that a ruler, even from behind curtains and shadows, must understand the heartbeat of her people. And she listened, always listened, with a quiet attention that made others feel seen. The chamber was spacious, its tall pillars painted with soft colors, deep reds, earth browns, faded blues. Sunlight filtered through carved openings high on the walls, falling in golden patterns across the floor. The air smelled faintly of incense, a calming fragrance that floated like a gentle ribbon through the room. Tiye sat on a low-cushioned seat, not on a high throne. She preferred to sit at a height that made conversation feel equal, soft, human. The first visitor entered, a scribe with neatly tied hair and ink stains on his fingers. He held a small scroll close to his chest, bowing deeply before he approached. His voice was steady but quiet, as he explained a small dispute between two local villages over water rights. Tiye listened with the stillness of someone who had mastered patience long ago. She asked a few simple questions, letting her voice drift like a soft stream across smooth stones. And then she offered her decision. Fair, gentle, but firm. The scribe bowed again, relief washing across his face like early morning light. Another visitor arrived, then another, each carrying their concerns, their questions, their worries, and their hopes. Tiye guided them all with a steady calmness. She understood that every decision she made carried weight, sometimes more weight than anyone else realized. And yet she never rushed. She spoke slowly, letting her words settle like fine dust on polished wood. Between the visits she paused, allowing the silence to fill the room. She enjoyed these small, quiet breaks. They were like tiny pockets of peace inside the long flow of her day. During these moments, she sometimes reached for a papyrus scroll beside her, reading updates about faraway regions of Egypt. She read about the harvest in the Delta, about stone shipments from quarries down south, about temple repairs, about trade boats coming in from foreign lands. She understood each of these things not as separate events but as pieces of the vast, delicate world she helped hold together. After the formal meetings ended, Tiye stepped outside into another courtyard, a peaceful open space where officials waited with reports and documents. But before she addressed them, she stopped near a shaded area where two young girls practiced reading aloud from a scroll. They were daughters of palace workers, given permission to learn in a small school within the palace grounds. Tiye believed strongly in education. She believed that knowledge created stronger minds, and stronger minds created a stronger Egypt. The girls stood up quickly when they saw her, nervous but excited. Tiye smiled gently and asked them to continue reading. Their small voices filled the warm air, lifting each word with careful effort. Tiye placed a hand softly on each girl's shoulder when they finished, offering quiet encouragement. She knew that such small moments often grew into lifelong confidence. When she returned to the officials with their reports, she took her time reading each one. She moved slowly through the inked lines, understanding not only the words but the lives behind them. The farmers cultivating land under the shining sun, the fishermen casting nets along the broad river, the brick makers shaping mud into blocks that would one day support grand walls. Every decision she made shaped the world in which they lived, and she carried this responsibility not with pride, but with deep, calm care. As the midday sun rose higher, the palace began to warm. Heat shimmered across the open courtyards, creating delicate waves in the air. Tiye walked back inside, moving into a shaded hallway lined with tall columns. Her sandals whispered softly against the cool stone. Here, away from the bright light, the air felt cooler, gentler. The walls were decorated with painted scenes, lotus flowers, graceful birds, flowing rivers, and symbols of life and protection. Tiye often paused here, tracing the shapes lightly with her fingertips, feeling the quiet presence of her ancestors watching over her. Soon, she arrived at another room where her closest advisors waited, a small circle of older men and women who had served the palace for many years. They bowed respectfully as she entered. Their discussions were always calm, never rushed. Tiye guided these conversations with a soft authority, balancing listening with gentle direction. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her calmness itself was a form of power. Time passed slowly, like warm honey flowing down a narrow path. The discussions drifted from temple construction to regional disputes, to the well-being of the king, her son. They spoke of diplomacy with foreign rulers, of delicate alliances, of trade routes running through the desert. Tiye never let the weight of their concerns disturb her inner peace. She listened, thought, and answered with the same steady softness that defined every part of her life. By the time the meetings ended, the sun had begun its slow descent. Long shadows stretched across the palace floors, and the warm orange light of afternoon settled gently over everything. Tiye took a deep breath, letting the calm beauty of the moment wrap around her like a soft linen shawl. Her day was far from over, but these afternoon hours always felt like a quiet turning point. They were a reminder that even in a world filled with duties and decisions, there was always space for stillness, always space for gentle reflection, always space for the quiet kind of strength that lived at the heart of Queen Tiye. As the warm afternoon air drifted slowly through the palace corridors, Queen Tiye allowed herself a moment of gentle rest before stepping into another part of her day. The palace was quieter now. The sounds of busy footsteps had softened. Even the birds in the courtyard seemed to settle into a slower rhythm, their chirping turning into calm, spaced-out notes that blended with the drowsy hum of the afternoon. Tiye walked to her private garden once again, but this time the light was different. It glowed in deep shades of honey and soft gold, painting the stones and plants in warm, peaceful tones. The lotus pond shimmered like a bowl of quiet sunshine. She paused beside it, watching tiny ripples move lazily across the surface. The world felt smooth and unhurried, as though time itself had laid down to rest. This was the hour she often devoted to her deeper duties. Not the daily tasks, not the meetings or petitions, but the quiet work that shaped the soul of a kingdom. She believed that a ruler's strength came not only from decisions, but from understanding the harmony between people, land, gods, and destiny. And in these gentle afternoon hours, she often met with the people who helped her maintain that harmony. The spiritual advisors, the temple priests, and the wise women who had spent their lives studying signs, stars, and the natural patterns of the world. A soft-footed priest approached her garden, bowing deeply before speaking. His voice was low and respectful as he shared messages from the temples, reports of rituals completed, offerings made, and small disturbances in distant shrines. Tiye listened with calm attention, her gaze drifting between the priest and the rippling pond. She understood that the spiritual heartbeat of Egypt was as important as its politics, and she handled both with the same gentle firmness. After the priest finished, she dismissed him with a soft nod. But she did not leave the garden just yet. Instead, she sat on a low stone bench beneath a palm tree, the shade wrapped around her like cool silk. She placed her hands softly in her lap and let her breathing slow. This was her moment of quiet meditation. She did not close her eyes fully. She simply let them soften as she focused on the sound of the breeze moving through tall papyrus reeds. It was a soothing, rustling sound, like soft whispers telling stories of the river. In this stillness, her mind wandered through memories and possibilities, things she needed to consider for the future of Egypt. Not in a tense or stressful way, but like a gentle assessment, the way someone might look over a calm river to understand its flow. She thought of her son, the king, and the challenges he faced in ruling such a vast, ancient land. She thought of the people who looked to her for guidance, from the highest nobles to the humblest farmers. She thought of the temples that honored the gods and how their rituals kept balance in Egypt's heart. All these thoughts drifted through her mind like clouds moving across a peaceful sky. After a few moments, a palace attendant approached quietly, bowing at a respectful distance. He informed her that a group of foreign envoys had arrived. They had brought gifts, rare fabrics, carved wooden boxes, and exotic oils from distant lands. These visits were common but important. Diplomacy, Tiye knew, was rarely loud. It was quiet, gentle, like the slow weaving of a basket, and she was a master at weaving. She rose from the bench with her usual grace and followed the attendant toward the receiving hall. The air inside was cool, shaded from the harsh afternoon sun. The envoys stood waiting, dressed in garments different from those of Egypt, slightly heavier fabrics, bold patterns, and ornaments unfamiliar to her own culture. They bowed deeply as she entered. Tiye moved toward them with a calm dignity, her steps slow and steady. The gifts were presented one by one. A carved box filled with fragrant spices, a delicate silver cup etched with foreign symbols, soft cloth dyed in colors rarely seen along the Nile. Tiye accepted each offering with gentle gratitude, her words soft and warm. She never exaggerated her reactions. She preferred sincerity, steady and real. And in return she offered Egypt's kindness, an assurance of continued peace, trade, and friendship. The envoys felt at ease in her presence. Even those who had traveled from very far lands unsure of how to behave in the court of Egypt's Queen Mother found comfort in her calm tone and steady gaze. Diplomacy, in her hands, became a soothing exchange rather than a tense negotiation. After the envoys left, Tiye remained alone in the hall for a moment. The light filtering through the tall windows touched the floor in long golden stripes. She walked slowly across them, feeling their warmth beneath her sandals. She paused near a window, looking out toward the distant horizon where the river glowed under the afternoon sun. Every time she looked at the Nile, she felt the same soft sense of peace. It flowed through the heart of Egypt like a slow, eternal breath. No matter what changed, kings, dynasties, decisions, the river remained steady. It reminded her of the kind of ruler she wanted to be. Constant calm, quietly giving life to everything around her. In the distance, she heard the faint laughter of children playing in a small courtyard. She smiled softly, letting the sound wrap around her heart. It was these moments, simple, gentle moments, that reminded her why she carried the weight of leadership with such care. A kingdom was not built only on temples and politics. It was built on people, on families, on laughter carried through warm afternoon winds. As the sun lowered even more, she left the hall and walked down a long corridor lined with tall statues of ancestors. Their stone faces looked down at her with ageless serenity. She bowed her head slightly in respect as she passed, acknowledging their silent guidance. Their presence reminded her that she was part of a long line of strength, wisdom, and responsibility. The afternoon slowly folded into early evening, wrapping the palace in soft shadows and fading sunlight. And with each quiet step she took, Tiye moved gracefully into the next chapter of her timeless day. Still calm, still strong, still guiding her world with a softness more powerful than any storm. As the soft hours of late afternoon slipped gently toward evening, the palace began to shift into a cooler, calmer mood. The long rays of sunlight thinned into soft bands of fading gold, brushing gently across the walls and floors. A hush settled over the great halls like a deep sigh after a long day. Everything seemed to breathe more slowly, more quietly, as if the palace itself was beginning to drift toward rest. Queen Tiye walked through one of the long colonnades that wrapped around the inner courtyard. Shadows from the tall pillars stretched across the path, creating alternating stripes of light and shade that moved softly beneath her feet. The air had become cooler now, touched by the first hint of the evening breeze rising from the river. It carried the refreshing scent of water, clay, and faraway fields beginning to quiet down for the night. This was the time of day Tiye often reserved for connecting with her family. She believed that no matter how powerful or busy a person became, the heart needed the warmth of familiar voices. And although she was a queen mother, a figure of immense authority, She was also a mother in the simplest, most tender sense. She entered a quiet room near the back of the palace, smaller and softer than the grand halls. The walls were painted in gentle colors, and cushions were arranged neatly along the floor. A small tray of dates, figs, and warm bread waited on a low table, prepared for her daily moment of rest. In this room there were no officials, no scribes, no priests, only family memories and quiet comfort. A few moments later, her daughter-in-law entered with a warm smile. She bowed respectfully, then sat beside Tiye with a gentle, graceful ease. Their conversations were never hurried. They spoke softly about the day, the well-being of the royal children, small events from the palace garden, and the responsibilities they shared as women who shaped the heart of Egypt. Sometimes they also discussed the king, Tiye's son, not in a formal or political manner, but with the warmth only family can share. She spoke of her hopes for him, her worries and her quiet pride. Her daughter-in-law listened with deep respect, often placing a comforting hand on Tiye's arm. The bond between them was calm, warm, and steady. After a short while, two young royal children peeked shyly through the doorway, Tiye's grandchildren. Their faces lit up when they saw her, and they ran forward with the sweet innocence of youth. Tiye opened her arms, welcoming them with a soft smile that brightened her entire expression. She lifted them gently, holding them close, breathing in the soft, comforting scent of their hair. The children sat with her, playing quietly near her feet. One of them showed her a small clay figure he had shaped earlier in the day, a little bird, uneven but full of heart. Tiye held it gently, turning it over slowly in her hands as if it were a precious treasure. She praised the child softly, her voice warm and soothing. To her, these small creations were more valuable than gold. The other child played with a reed basket, placing tiny stones inside and shaking it lightly to hear the sound. Tiye smiled at the simple joy of it. These moments, peaceful and full of innocence, reminded her that even in the center of a great empire, life's greatest warmth came from small, gentle memories. When the children grew sleepy, they leaned against her, their eyes blinking slowly, ready to drift into dreams. Tiye called a nursemaid who entered quietly, lifting the children with soft arms and carrying them to their resting place. Tiye watched them go with a tenderness that softened every line of her face. After they left, Tiye and her daughter-in-law sat together for a few more breaths, enjoying the quiet. No words were necessary. Sometimes silence is the purest form of connection, and this silence, warm and soft, wrapped around them like a gentle shawl. As evening approached, Tiye rose and walked with her daughter-in-law toward the balcony that overlooked the river. The sky had deepened into soft shades of lavender and gold. The Nile shimmered below like a long, peaceful ribbon reflecting the last light of day. Boats drifted slowly across the water, their sails glowing gently in the sunset. The sight was unbelievably calming, like a painting made from breath and silence. Tiye rested her hands lightly on the smooth stone railing, closing her eyes for a moment as the evening breeze touched her face. This was her favorite time of day, the meeting point between light and darkness, warmth and coolness, activity and rest. It was the hour where Egypt exhaled. Her daughter-in-law stood beside her, also watching the river. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. In the stillness of that moment, they felt the quiet bond between them grow even deeper. Eventually, Tiye returned inside to prepare for the last part of her day. But as she walked away from the balcony, she carried the peaceful colors of the sunset deep inside her heart. It was this calm, steady peace that she used to guide her thoughts, her decisions, and her dreams for Egypt. Evening had arrived, soft, gentle, and full of quiet promise. As the last colors of sunset slowly dissolved into the horizon, the palace lanterns began to glow with a warm, golden softness. Their light flickered gently against the stone walls, creating slow-moving patterns that danced like quiet memories. The world outside had dimmed, wrapped now in the calm of approaching night, and inside the palace, everything seemed to lower its voice, slow its pace, breathe more deeply. Queen Tiye walked toward the inner sanctuary of her private chambers. The evenings were her sacred time, an hour when she allowed her mind to unwind from the responsibilities of rulers, priests, scribes, and endless decisions. Now only her thoughts remained, softer, slower, drifting like the quiet clouds above the river. As she entered her chamber, the gentle smell of lotus flowers drifted through the room. The scent was calming, light and familiar, something she had loved since her childhood. A small oil lamp burned steadily in the corner, casting a golden glow that made the room feel warm and safe. Cushions were arranged neatly beside a low table, and the polished floor reflected the soft light like liquid bronze. A servant girl entered silently, placing a cup of warm herbal tea beside Tiye, and then stepping away with graceful quiet. Tiye lifted the cup in her hands, feeling its comforting warmth seep into her palms. She took a slow sip, tasting the mild sweetness of chamomile and honey. It relaxed her breath, loosened her shoulders, and settled her mind. For a few long moments, Tiye simply sat still, listening to the faint sounds of the night. Far outside, a single flute played softly near the river bank, its notes drifting toward the palace like tiny threads of moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, water lapped gently against a passing boat. A light evening wind rustled through the palm trees. The world felt peaceful, slow, gentle. Tiye reached for a small wooden box beside her. Inside were letters, messages written earlier in the day by officials from distant regions of Egypt. She scanned a few of them, absorbing their concerns and updates. She was a queen mother after all. Her guidance shaped the kingdom. But tonight she read them with a calmer heart, letting the weight of responsibility soften instead of tighten. After placing the letters aside, she walked toward a wide window that faced the open night sky. The moon had risen now, large, round, and glowing softly as if floating on a bed of silver mist. Stars began to appear one by one, tiny and bright, sparkling like jewels scattered across a velvet cloth. The Nile far below reflected the moonlight in a shimmering line that looked almost like a pathway of silver leading into the unknown. Tiye rested her hands gently on the edge of the window ledge, breathing slowly as the cool night air touched her face. She felt it move across her skin, light, refreshing, almost like a soothing whisper. Standing there, she felt a deep sense of connection to her past, to her family, to her people, to the land she loved, and to the endless sky above her. A quiet knock sounded at the door. One of her most trusted handmaidens entered and bowed gently. She held a small clay tablet, fresh news from the king's council. Tiye took it, scanning the carved symbols. Nothing urgent, nothing heavy, just updates. She nodded softly and handed it back. The handmaiden bowed again, then left with the same silent grace. Tiye turned once more toward the moon, letting its silver glow soak into her thoughts. She thought of the river, the temples, the workers who would soon sleep in their homes, the children who were already dreaming, and the vast kingdom that rested under the same sky. She felt both small and powerful, humble, yet deeply connected to every heartbeat of Egypt. Slowly she closed her eyes, and in the quiet darkness behind her eyelids, she allowed herself a moment of complete rest. No titles, no duties, no expectations. Just a woman breathing gently in the soft embrace of night. After a long, peaceful silence, she stepped away from the window, her movements slow and graceful, as if gliding. She sat on her bed, the linen cool beneath her fingers. A soft breeze lifted the edge of the curtain, letting moonlight spill across the floor in a soft silver arc. Tonight felt long, calm, healing. Tiye lay down, closing her eyes again, letting the night wrap around her like a warm shawl. She whispered a quiet prayer for peace, for guidance, and for the strength to continue shaping the kingdom with wisdom and love. The palace settled into silence, and the queen drifted slowly toward her dreams, carried gently by the calm of the night. The night had grown deeper now. The palace, once alive with footsteps and gentle conversations, had become almost completely still. Only the faint glow of moonlight lingered across the long corridors, resting softly on the cool stone floors like a thin layer of silver dust. Everything had quieted. Everything had slowed, as if the entire world had taken a deep breath and decided to rest. Queen Tiye rose slowly from her bed, not because she could not sleep, but because the night sometimes called her in a quiet, comforting way. There were moments when the hush of darkness felt like an old friend, gentle, patient, and ready to hold her thoughts without judgment. She wrapped a soft linen shawl around her shoulders and walked toward the inner garden that lay hidden in the heart of the palace. The small garden was one of her favorite places, a peaceful sanctuary, open to the stars above, protected by tall walls that blocked the world outside. In the center stood a lily pond, its water still and smooth like polished glass. Moonlight settled on its surface, creating a soft, shimmering glow that looked almost magical. Tiye stepped onto the smooth stone walkway surrounding the pond. The faint scent of jasmine drifted through the air, sweet, calming, almost like a sigh. Crickets chirped softly somewhere in the corners of the garden, adding a gentle rhythm to the silence. Each sound blended perfectly with the night, creating a slow, soothing melody that made the heart settle in comfort. She paused at the edge of the pond and looked down. The water reflected her face, but in a calmer, softer way, almost as if the pond saw not the queen, but the woman beneath. Her reflection shimmered gently with each tiny ripple, like a dream floating across the surface. For a while she simply stood there, breathing slowly, her thoughts drifting like the soft movement of water. She thought of the people of Egypt, resting in their homes, sleeping under the same moon. She imagined the distant farms, the fishermen's boats tied along the riverbank, the quiet villages where only lamps glowed in small windows. She felt connected to all of them, as if invisible threads of gentle responsibility tied her heart to theirs. A soft rustling sound came from the bushes nearby. A small desert cat emerged, sleek, quiet, with golden fur that glowed faintly under the moonlight. These little cats often wandered freely through the palace gardens, and Tiye always welcomed their presence. This one approached her slowly, its movements graceful and unhurried. Tiye knelt down and extended her hand. The cat brushed its head gently against her fingers, purring softly, a tiny, warm vibration that felt grounding and sweet. She smiled, her heart easing even further. The cat stayed by her side, curling up on the stone as if it too found comfort in her presence. T then walked to a small stone bench beneath a palm tree, its long leaves swaying ever so lightly with the breeze. She sat down, letting her shawl settle around her. The stone felt cool, but the air was warm, creating a soothing balance that made her sink deeper into calm. Above her the sky stretched wide and endless, dotted with stars that flickered softly like distant candles. The Milky Way was a faint, misty cloud, drifting like a silver river across the night sky. She loved looking at it, imagining the stories the ancestors once told about these stars. Stories that guided sailors, comforted travelers, and inspired priests in their prayers. Her thoughts moved slowly, peacefully, touching memories of her children, especially Akhenaten, who would one day lead Egypt in his own way. She wondered about the future, but without worry. The night was too gentle for fear. Everything felt softened, eased, wrapped in moonlight. She closed her eyes again. The breeze moved across her face like a soft, cool hand. The sound of the water, the whisper of leaves, the soft purring of the little desert cat. All of it blended into a peaceful lullaby. The world outside the palace might have been filled with politics and complexities, but here, in this garden, nothing demanded from her. Nothing rushed her. Nothing pulled at her mind. She could simply exist. In silence, in calm, in the warmth of a night that understood her. Minutes felt like hours and hours felt like moments. When she finally opened her eyes, the moon had shifted a little higher in the sky. Tiye stood, her movements light and unhurried, and walked once more around the pond, letting her fingertips glide softly across the cool stone rail. She whispered a quiet blessing to the night, thanking it for its peace, for its stillness, for its gentle company. Then, with a calm heart and a mind resting like still water, she walked back toward her chamber, the soft flutter of her steps fading slowly into the quiet corridor. The queen returned to her bed, lying down as the moonlight softened across her floor, and sleep came to her like a tender embrace, slow, warm, and welcoming. The night continued its gentle path over Egypt, and by the time Queen Tiye drifted into her deep rest, the palace around her had settled into a silence so soft that it felt almost sacred. The tall columns, the wide courtyards, the painted walls, all seemed to breathe quietly in the cool hours before dawn. It was a rare kind of calm, the kind that only appeared when the world forgot its worries for a moment. As Tiye slept peacefully, her dreams carried her to the edges of her childhood memories, warm, golden images softened by time. She saw herself as a young girl again, running through the village where she was born, her feet dusty, her laughter echoing lightly in the warm air. The houses were small, made of mud brick and straw, their roofs flat and sunlit. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted from a nearby oven. It was a simple world, but in her dream it felt safe, familiar, and full of love. She remembered her mother's hands, rough from work but gentle in their touch. She remembered the river where she played with other children, the cool water splashing around her ankles, the reeds whispering as the wind passed through them. She remembered how the sky above her seemed endless, stretching from horizon to horizon like a comforting blanket. Dreams have a way of blurring time, and slowly her childhood village shifted into the grand palace where she now lived. But it did not change sharply or suddenly. It transformed softly, as if carried by a slow-moving river. The mud brick houses grew taller, their walls smooth and painted. Simple reed mats became wide-tiled floors. Small clay lamps became golden torches glowing softly through long corridors. Yet in the dream, Tiye did not feel the difference as something overwhelming. She simply walked through it all with quiet acceptance, understanding that life had carried her from one place to another, gently and carefully, step by step. She drifted across the palace halls as though floating, passing by woven tapestries that depicted stories of gods and creation. The colors were muted by the softness of the dream, the edges blurred like a watercolor painting. She saw tiny moments of her life appear in these tapestries: her marriage to Amenhotep III, the birth of her children, her first council meeting, her first decisions as queen. None of it felt heavy or demanding. It was simply her story, unfolding gently before her. There was a hallway lit with warm torchlight where she saw a young version of herself standing confidently, listening to an advisor's words. She looked determined and sure, even though she was still learning the early shapes of power. The young Tiye gently turned her head and looked at the dream Tiye with a reassuring smile, as if reminding her, "You handled everything with strength, and you still do." Then, as dreams do, the scene shifted again without hurry. She found herself walking along the Nile. The moonlight rippled over the slow-moving water like silk. Palm leaves rustled above her, and the air was cool and sweet. The sounds of frogs and insects blended into a soft lullaby that the river seemed to hum from its very heart. She walked barefoot on the damp riverbank, the sand cool beneath her toes. Each step made a soft impression that filled slowly with water before fading away. She paused to watch the gentle waves touching the shore, their rhythm calm and patient. A small wooden boat floated near the edge, rocking ever so lightly. Tiye stepped into it, and as soon as she sat down, the boat drifted forward, slow, steady, almost guided by an unseen hand. The flow of the river carried her in silence, the world around her stretching out in soft shapes and muted colors. The stars reflected in the water, making it look as though she were floating through the sky. As she drifted, she thought about the people she had guided, the decisions she had made, and the love she had offered to her family and her kingdom. But none of these thoughts came with pressure. Tonight, they came with gentleness, like warm hands resting on her shoulders, reminding her that she had done enough, that she was enough. The boat continued gliding until it reached a place where the water grew still like a mirror. Tiye leaned back and allowed herself to breathe, slow and deep, letting the calm wash through her like a quiet tide. The gentle rocking of the boat felt like a mother's embrace, steady and soothing, pulling her deeper into tranquility. The sky above her began to grow lighter, just a hint of soft blue spreading into the darkness. Dawn would come soon, but she didn't feel rushed. The river rocked her gently, as if giving her a little more time to rest before the world awoke. Her dream began to fade like mist. The river, the stars, the soft light, they all dissolved slowly, calmly, without disturbance. And as they faded, she felt herself sinking into an even deeper, safer sleep. A sleep wrapped in warmth, peace, and the quiet comfort of the night's embrace. The early light of dawn had not yet touched the palace walls when Tiye drifted deeper into the warm silence of her dream. It was a silence that did not feel empty. It felt full, like a soft blanket wrapped around her spirit. Everything was calm, still, and peaceful. The kind of quiet that only exists in the last moments before morning wakes the world. Tiye felt herself moving through a familiar yet dream-softened space, a place between memory and imagination. She found herself standing in a hallway she knew well, yet here it glowed with a softer, gentler light. The tall columns rose around her like guardians, their carved shapes softened by the haze of sleep. Every step she took echoed faintly, like a distant lullaby whispering through the stone. The air was cool and gentle, and each breath she took loosened the weight of the world from her shoulders. She was no longer the queen making decisions. She was simply a woman moving through the quiet of her own mind, allowed to rest, allowed to breathe. She walked slowly until the hallway opened into a large chamber filled with a warm, golden glow. This was the Hall of Images, a place where artists had painted scenes of her life, moments from her childhood, her marriage, her reign, and her family. But in her dream, these paintings were not still. They gently shifted, flowing like soft watercolors, moving in slow waves as if the story was alive. The first painting showed her as a girl sitting beneath the shade of a sycamore tree, braiding reeds into small toys. She remembered that day. The breeze had been cool, carrying the smell of wet soil and sweet herbs. Her mother had laughed nearby, arranging baskets for the evening meal. Tiye felt a deep warmth inside her, knowing that even though life had taken her far from those days, the love from her childhood had stayed with her always. Another painting shimmered softly and changed into her wedding day. She saw herself standing beside Amenhotep III, both young and full of quiet promise. The crowd around them was a blur of warm colors, but the young couple in the center stood completely still, wrapped in a gentle glow. She watched the two of them smile at one another, not yet aware of how their lives would intertwine with history. The dream Tiye felt neither pride nor sadness, only peace. Life had carried her forward in its gentle rhythm, and she had followed with grace. She walked deeper into the hall until she reached another painting, this one of her son Akhenaten as a young boy. He was sitting on her lap, his tiny hands playing with a golden amulet. She remembered how soft his hair had been, how curious his eyes. He had always seemed to look beyond things, as though searching for truth behind the world itself. She smiled softly, her heart warm. Even dreams could not erase a mother's love. As the images faded again, the room around her shifted slowly. The golden glow dimmed into a soft blue, like early dawn. She stepped through an archway and found herself in the palace gardens. The air was filled with the scent of night-blooming flowers, jasmine, lotus, and blue lily. Dew rested on each leaf, sparkling softly in the dim light. A narrow pathway wound between the trees, and she followed it, her footsteps making no sound. Birds slept quietly on the branches above her, their feathers tucked gently beneath their wings. The world felt as though it were holding its breath, letting her pass without disturbance. She reached the center of the garden where a still pool reflected the last of the night sky. The water was smooth and calm, like polished stone. Tiye sat at its edge and dipped her fingers into the cool surface. Ripples moved outward, slow and delicate, catching the faint glow of the stars. She let herself rest there, breathing in the cool morning air. Her mind drifted between memories and dreams, between who she had been and who she had become, and everything inside her settled quietly, like grains of sand falling gently to the bottom of a jar. After a long moment, the pool began to glow softly, not like fire, not like sunlight, but like a quiet inner light, rising from the water as though the river of time itself had come to speak with her. She leaned closer, and in the shimmering reflection she saw countless faces: farmers, mothers, children, priests, builders, artists, people from every corner of Egypt, people who had lived ordinary lives, loved deeply, worked with devotion, and looked to their queen for guidance. She watched them slowly, tenderly. There was no weight in their eyes, no pressure, no demands, only gratitude. Soft, warm, and gentle, and Tiye felt herself respond, not with words, but with a calm breath. A breath that carried all the love she had ever given to her people. The reflection faded. The light softened. The pool stilled once more. Tiye closed her eyes, letting the peace sink deeper into her heart. A soft breeze passed through the garden, brushing gently against her face, like a whispered blessing from the night. And as the breeze quieted, she felt herself drifting again, down into a deeper layer of rest where dreams soften into velvety darkness, where thoughts float away like small boats on a calm river, where the world becomes silent and safe. She lay back on the soft grass, the earth cool beneath her, the sky slowly turning to pale blue above. The first tiny birds began to stir, but the sound was faint, gentle, like a distant lullaby. Tiye's breathing grew slow and even. The garden faded softly around her, and she drifted deeper, deeper, into the warm silence of the morning dream. The morning light had begun its slow journey across the sky, but Queen Tiye remained wrapped in the gentle layers of her dream. It was the kind of dream that feels more like floating than sleeping, where the body is still, the mind is quiet, and the heart simply exists in a safe, warm space. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded. Everything moved with the slow rhythm of peace. As Tiye drifted deeper, the garden around her began to transform again. The soft grass beneath her became a warm, woven mat, the kind used in simple village homes. The sound of birds faded into the gently familiar quiet of early morning in the countryside. Her dream carried her back, far, far back to the days before the palace, before the crown, before responsibility touched her shoulders. She found herself sitting outside a small mud brick home, the walls sun-baked and warm, the doorway shaded by a simple woven curtain. Her mother knelt beside a clay pot, grinding herbs with steady hands. The smell drifted upward, fresh, earthy, calming. It smelled like childhood mornings, like comfort, like the world before things became complicated. Young Tiye sat with her legs crossed, weaving thin reeds into a small basket. Her fingers moved slowly, clumsy at first, then smoother as she found the pattern. Her mother looked up from her work and smiled, a soft, tired smile filled with love. In the dream, the older Tiye watched the scene unfold with a warmth that filled her chest. She remembered that morning. She remembered the way the sunlight had rested on her mother's face. She remembered how proud she felt when her basket took shape. She remembered the peace of those quiet hours. The dream was gentle. It did not overwhelm her with emotion. It simply held the memory like a fragile piece of glass, turning it slowly so that its warm glow touched her heart. The scene shifted once more, not sharply, but like a slow sunrise changing color. The village faded into soft light, and from that light emerged the palace again, but this time not full of duties or advisors or ceremony. This time, the palace felt like a sanctuary, wide open, warmed by morning gold, softened by the gentle quiet that comes before the day begins. Tiye walked through the halls, her hands brushing lightly along the walls painted with stories of gods and creation. The paintings seemed to breathe, soft blues, warm reds, deep golds. They all shimmered faintly, as though made of morning light. She stepped into a private chamber where a low table held scrolls and small clay figures. These were the tools of learning, the instruments she had used when she taught her children. She remembered sitting with them, their young faces full of curiosity. She remembered teaching them to read the symbols carved along the papyrus. She remembered the joy of explaining the stories written by their ancestors. In her dream, she saw herself sitting with them again. They were young, laughing softly, their eyes wide and bright. She guided their small hands along the lines of the script, teaching them to trace the shapes slowly, patiently. Her voice, even in the memory, was calm and warm. The scene softened again, and Tiye stepped back into the corridor. The palace felt lighter now, almost weightless, as though everything in it had shed the heaviness of the world and kept only the beauty. The soft light filtered down through tall windows, casting gentle patterns on the floor. She walked toward a balcony overlooking the Nile. The river shimmered like a ribbon of silver and blue, moving with the slow grace of eternity. Boats floated lazily across it, their sails catching the early breeze. Along the far bank, farmers began their quiet morning work, moving with the familiar rhythm of a life that never rushed. Tiye leaned against the warm stone railing and breathed in the fresh air. The world below felt peaceful, steady, alive in its simple ways. Even the river seemed to hum a lullaby, a soft and ancient melody that wrapped around her like a comforting shawl. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the water drift through her mind. The river had carried Egypt through centuries. It had carried her too, in ways seen and unseen. It had nourished her people. It had given her memories. It had connected everything, like a thread of calm woven through the heart of the world. As she stood there, breathing deeply, the dream gently shifted once more. She found herself back in a candlelit room, a place she knew well. Here, she often sat alone at night, reflecting on her decisions. But in the dream, the room felt different. There was no weight, no burden, no sharp thoughts. Sharp, only quiet, only warmth, only a soft flame flickering gently, casting golden circles of light that danced across the walls. She sat before the candle, watching its glow. The flame swayed like a tiny dancer, bowing and rising, bending and breathing. And with each movement, Tiye felt her own breath deepen, slow, soften, until she and the candle seemed to share the same rhythm. The room dimmed around her. The flame grew softer, smaller then steadier. It felt like a symbol of her heart, still burning, still warm, still gentle even after all the years she had lived, all the choices she had made, all the love she had given. As she watched the candle, her eyelids grew heavy. The dream darkened softly at the edges, wrapping her in shadow like a silk shawl. She did not resist. She allowed herself to sink into the darkness, to let it cradle her, to let it carry her deeper into rest. And as the candlelight faded, she drifted again, quiet as a feather floating on air, soft as evening wind moving through lotus petals, gentle as the whisper of the river at night. Tiye breathed once more, slowly, calmly, peacefully, and she let herself fall deeper into the warm embrace of sleep.